Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast exploring life-changing career moves. I'm your host, Brian Aquart. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the bold decisions that transform their careers and lives. Let's dive in. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. Today, I'm excited to introduce an inspiring guest who's transformed her corporate career into a thriving role as a sought-after ghostwriter. Known as the Soul-Aligned Ghostwriter, Danielle Perlin-Good empowers executives, leaders, and authors to share their unique stories and create lasting legacies. With over 15 years in writing, publishing, and marketing, Danielle's journey into ghostwriting brings a fresh perspective on the power of storytelling and the impact of purpose-driven content. If you've ever wondered about the magic behind writing someone else's story, or what it means to be truly soul-aligned in your work, this episode is for you. Let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Danielle Perlin-Good, a best-selling, award-winning author and ghostwriter who specializes in amplifying the stories of company founders, leaders, and visionaries. Her expertise spans over 200 content pieces and more than 25 books, touching on everything from memoirs and thought leadership to self-help and business. Starting her career with the Chicago Tribune, Danielle's path led her through corporate marketing and publishing before she found her true calling in ghostwriting. She uniquely combines mindset coaching and quantum healing techniques to create an experience that goes beyond just the written word. She brings to life a soul-aligned journey that empowers her clients to make a profound impact. So I'm very, very excited to have her on the show. So please welcome Danielle Perlin-Good. How you doing?
Hi, Brian. I am great today. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm doing well. Things are going very smoothly. And I really appreciate you joining. You know, when we connected on LinkedIn, saw a little bit more about your journey. Would love for you to talk a little bit about that. But it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, wow, the ghostwriting, all those things. I'm sure people have so many questions about that. So it was really just very timely that we were able to connect. So let's start it off with really a little bit about your journey. As I mentioned, you started out at the Chicago Tribune. So how did you really get into this space, and talk to us a little bit about, your work in corporate digital marketing?
Absolutely. I was at the Chicago Tribune for a few years after undergrad, and I was in one of the mass layoffs. And when somebody had asked me what I wanted to be, what you want to do growing up in high school, one of my answers was always, I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to work at the Chicago Tribune. I thought that was my calling. I thought that was my dream. I hit it out of the park. I was 22. I said, this is great. This is where I want to be. This is going to be exactly where I'm supposed to be. Well, I think a lot of listeners and a lot of people have these dreams. And I think that sometimes what happens is the universe allows us and forces us to pivot those dreams. And that's exactly what happened to me. So instead, I had a talk with myself and I said, where am I going to go from here? What do I want to do? And I started going to networking events, and I started telling people that I was going to be in digital marketing. And I learned everything that I could. I learned how to be a freelance digital marketer. I was also freelance writing at the time for other local newspapers. And when I went to this one event, somebody, and I still remember this very clearly, asked me, do you have digital marketing experience? And I'm sure a lot of people listening also have been asked those similar questions when pivoting those dreams, pivoting what you want to do, pivoting fields, right? And my answer was the fact that I had years of experience writing and editing already allowed me to pivot those skills into a different field, right? So that's something that I think is really important to think about and remember when going into another field that's similar to the last field you were in, right? And then what happened was I saw this job posting one day, and I ended up applying to be the social media coordinator as a newer marketing department at a local publishing company. And I really liked what their mission was. I really loved some of the children's books that they were publishing. It was in the Chicago area. Really wonderful fit for what I wanted to do next. And I got the job. And I was there for several years.
Nice.
And then a lot of people ended up leaving that company for a variety of reasons. And I had this epiphany the following several months. I said, I need to start my own business. I am so sick of working so hard for other people. And I couldn't get a raise. I couldn't figure out a way of pleasing these corporate executives who didn't seem to really care about me, wasn't sure if they cared about the mission and values of the company themselves. I still don't know to this day, and I don't care because what happened was I believed in myself and I said, I'm going to put those beliefs first. And I said, I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to do digital marketing freelancing. I'm going to do more writing and editing. I'm going to have my own LLC. I'm going all in. This is what I'm going to do. And then I got pregnant and I took several months off after having some clients. And then what happened was I was nursing my son. He was 8 months old at the time. And I was at a point where I said, I really want to freelance again. I really want to start up my business again. And I still had my LLC, but I wasn't really running it, right? It was something that was in the background. And I wanted to be forefront, right? I wanted that to be something that I really put a lot of effort and energy into. Right. And at 1 a.m, I had what I call a spiritual awakening. And I was listening to an audiobook. It was a nonfiction self-help book. And I believe that one of my spirit guides came down and said, you need to start book coaching. I had no idea what book coaching was. I didn't know the first thing about it. And the next day, I said, I'm going to hire a sleep coach and a book coach. And my husband and I are still married. It's my joke now. I did that in the same week because I said, I need to function better. I need to figure out how to restart what I want to do in my business. And my first couple of clients came from both my business coach at the time. And then I also had a couple of clients who came from my synagogue. And that's really how I got started I was 100% honest with my clients. I said, these are my skill sets. This is what I know I can do. I am going to help you through what you want so that we can reach your goal together, right? And that's still what I do to this day.
No, I love that. And, when you think about your experience in publishing and then in corporate marketing and then now getting into this book coaching piece, how did that really shape your approach to writing and working with clients today?
That's an excellent question. I like to say it is a figure it out mentality. So what happened was I met somebody that had a business for thought leaders, and she was looking for writing coaches at the time. So I added on to my own company and was a writing coach for her company also. And I think that can be a really great way for anybody to get started, is to make those connections and look and say, I really want to learn how to do this. Is there a way that I can do this with or for somebody else while building my business? And that was really wonderful experience. Very grateful for it. I learned a lot in terms of what I thought would be working, what I now know does not work, and what I wanted to do moving forward. And then what started happening was I was reaching out to different individuals who I thought would be really great to work with. I said, have you ever thought of writing a book? And I had this marketing campaign that I was doing on LinkedIn. And I had a few calls with people who said, I just don't have the time to write it myself. And I realized and recognized the need for ghostwriting.
Mm.
So then what happened was I had those conversations with these clients and I said, listen, I can ghostwrite your book and I'm going to charge a very small fee. I haven't done this before, but I know that I can be successful with this. I know how to write in your voice because of the experience I have. Do you trust me? Can you give me a chance? And they said yes.
I love that. That actually is a great segue because I was going to ask you kind of what inspired that pivot from the corporate into ghostwriting. And so it sounds like people didn't have that time, but was there like a specific maybe defining moment or realization that led you down to that path, like this aha moment that I'm going to write for others?
I have always enjoyed storytelling, even from a young age. If somebody asked me when I was younger, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said author or veterinarian because I love animals and I love stories. And growing up, I had always had this innate interest in human interest stories. I am always the person who cares about understanding people's perspectives, understanding why people enjoy certain activities, why they like to do certain things, why they don't like to do certain things. I would cover events. I would cover all kinds of feature stories, right? Features was always something that was very near and dear to my heart growing up and then moving into adulthood. And what I realized with that was I not only learned how to communicate with lots and lots and lots of different people, but I also learned how to portray what was important to them. And that's the voice. That is understanding how to portray voice in the story. That's what ghostwriting is understanding how to do that in a successful way.
No, that's huge. That's huge. This shift from, digital marketing, ghostwriting, it's a very unique type of shift. And I love hearing more about this. But what are some of the challenges that you faced as you stepped into this more entrepreneurial role? Like, you had a business, but like now you're really to your point, betting on yourself. So what were some of the challenges you faced when you were like, you know what, I'm going all in?
I think learning how to build a business, honestly, it's been really difficult, but very fun in a lot of ways. And I just talked about this with somebody else the other day. And I really believe that, hustle culture is not canceled. I think that when you have a business, you have to learn how best to serve your clients, how to have an appropriate and healthy sales cycle. I think it's important to understand what support you need and what support you don't need. And I made lots of mistakes along the way with hiring the wrong support, buying the wrong course, having clients who said that they would do certain things, or I said I would do certain things, and then it ended up not being the best relationship, which happens in every single business, right? And I think that if a business owner doesn't have those stories, then I would be shocked.
No, without a doubt. And so speaking on that, what has been the most significant lesson that you've learned throughout this transition into ghostwriting? And really, how has it influenced the way you approach your work with clients now?
Listening to my gut, my intuition is always number one. If I get on a call with somebody and my intuition says, run away, this is not going to be a good person.
Right.
And my brain says, oh, well, they really want to sign with me now. Maybe it'll end up being okay. It never ends up being okay. That is my absolute number one lesson that I have learned. And that goes along with understanding meditation, having my spiritual storytelling background now, incorporating spirituality with my clients and my business. That's how I approach business now as well. And that has helped me tremendously.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit more about that spirituality, because one of the things that really caught my attention is obviously the name of your company, right? The Soul-Aligned Ghostwriter, which you feel when you say it. So by the way, great job coming up with the name, right? So you have this company, the Soul-Aligned Ghostwriter, very unique. What does soul-aligned mean to you? And how does it shape your process with your clients?
Soul aligned to me means you have a really great understanding of your intuitive capabilities. It means that you are very well connected with your higher self and understand where you want to go. You do not let obstacles stop you or prevent you from becoming that higher self, right? At the same time, you have a greater understanding of what your higher self can give. I'm a very, very big believer in not only receiving, but giving as well. So if somebody asks me for a recommendation for something, I take that seriously. And I look and I say, okay, who do I know who can help this person do XYZ? I will help them. I will make sure that that connection is set up for success. That is what is really important to me. I have also found that having this soul aligned approach has also led me to really wonderful clients, great partnerships, people who believe in having a soul aligned approach as well. And those are the types of people who I enjoy having around me, surrounding me in business and in life in general.
I love that. And can you elaborate a little bit more on your mission to help leaders really create that legacy through their content? Like, what does legacy building look like for them and for some of the work that you do?
I believe that there are a couple of different ways to think about it. One is incorporating vulnerable spiritual stories, right? If you are posting on LinkedIn, or we've all read books that just are very surface level, they're fact after fact after fact, research after research, that's great. But what is your personal mission? What is your personalized story that has to do with the research, that has to do with the point that you want to make, right? And that brings me to the second point, which is being authentic. If you are not being authentic and true to yourself and to the people who you serve, if you're posting a bunch of stuff, or if you're writing a book and ends up being something that is not authentic to you, it will come through. People will see through that. That has been happening for years and years and years. So my advice, be vulnerable and be authentic.
I love that. And, I would imagine there are a lot of people who maybe, well, not maybe a lot, but of people who are listening who may not really understand what ghostwriting actually is. And so it's something that, they misunderstand. But what is a common misconception about ghostwriting that maybe you've heard and want to clarify?
Absolutely. I've had people come to me and say, well, I have parts of this manuscript. Can you just edit it and add some stuff? And I say, that's not editing, that's ghostwriting. If I am writing in your story and for you, as you, that is called ghostwriting. There are different options when it comes to support levels that range from manuscript assessment to different editorial services, to book doctoring, and then ghostwriting, right? And a lot of people don't know the differences between editing, book doctoring, ghostwriting, for instance, and then all the different levels of editing. So my advice also is, if you are looking for support for a nonfiction book or any type of book, any type of content, have an idea of what type of support would be helpful and supportive for your mission, right? So then when you're having those conversations with me or somebody in my position, then we have a better idea of how we can help you and what would be beneficial to reach that collective goal.
I love that. And so this is a great transition into, now let's talk a little bit about advice, right? Because I think obviously a lot of people who listen to my show either have pivoted careers before or maybe anticipating a future pivot. And so for those who may be considering that pivot, especially into more creative fields like writing or ghostwriting or that creative aspect, what advice would you give them to help prepare for the transition that they're about to undergo?
I would suggest talking and having conversations with individuals who have already done what you want to be doing. have informational interviews, look people up on LinkedIn. I've had people do this to me, and I have made time to meet with people who say to me, I have this writing background or I have a philosophy background, and I'm really interested in learning more about your ghostwriting approach. Do you have a few minutes to chat with me? I say, absolutely, of course. Because the thing is that I had that support too. And everybody does when starting business, when continuing to have a business. And I think it's really critical to be able to give back and then find the right people to be supportive in your circle. If you're going at it alone, what's going to happen is you're going to spend hours and hours and hours of research. You're going to go on all the social media sites. You're going to go on YouTube and watch countless videos. You're going to go on Spotify and listen to 5 million podcasts, right? And you're not going to know where to look, right? If you talk to somebody in the field like me or, other ghostwriters, other storytellers, other writers, let's say, for this example, then what we can do is we can give you a list of things to look up, to research. And that's the same for every other position. Find somebody who is, let's say you're a chief marketing officer and you want to pivot and do fractional work, right? Find a fractional CMO on LinkedIn and message a few of them and say, hey, do you have 10 to 15 minutes? Can I buy you a virtual cup of coffee? And, I'm really interested in pivoting to this fractional model, and I'm not sure where to start. I would really appreciate your advice. And I guarantee you people will respond.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so that's more like the folks who are looking to get into a different creative field.
Sure.
Now let's move to folks who are maybe hesitant or intimidated by the process of actually telling their own story, right? So what's maybe some advice that you have for leaders and other experts who are considering maybe writing their own first book or diving into content creation? What would you share with them?
So if you walk into a bookstore, there are lots of different sections, right? There's leadership, there's history, politics, religion, bunch of novels, romance, young adult, middle grade, the list goes on. There are always new books every single season in all of those sections. There are millions of books printed on Amazon every single day. Right? I'd have to look up the exact stats. We can do that and see. But the idea that your perspective doesn't matter, I don't buy it. I believe that there are a finite number of ideas in the world, generic ideas. There are leadership models. There are ways of marketing, right? Really, really large categories of ideas. But your perspective on that idea and the experiences that you have can bring your own thought leadership into the world. And with your own thought leadership, that's how you meet your clients. That's how you meet your people.
Oh, I love that. And I did just look up this stat while you were responding. It says on Amazon Kindle Direct, approximately 7,500 new Kindle ebooks are published daily. This translates to around 225,000 ebooks monthly and about 2.7 million ebooks annually. Wow.
And that's only ebook.
And that's only ebooks, right? That's only ebooks. If I look at the books published each day, and this is around like self-published. It says that all self-published books. So this is around, there's a new book published every 8 seconds or nearly 11,000 per day. Wow. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. So you're right. So to the folks who are like worried about, oh, do I have a story to tell? Somebody has already made the decision that they have a story to tell and they have put that into the atmosphere. So I love that you say that. That's so timely. Now thinking about the future for you, your business, yourself, what type of impact are you hoping to have as we look forward?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm actually working on my own thought leadership book as well and working out those details. So we will definitely be talking about that another time when
Okay.
I have more specifics that I'm able to share. So,
Okay.
very excited about that. That is going to be something that where I'm going to work really hard on, and is very. I anticipate that that will be very beneficial to the future of my business as well, in terms of combining what I teach. Right. So I teach and talk a lot about spiritual storytelling, about the importance of marketing, the importance of project management, organization, logic. All of those things are necessary when creating a really great book product. And a lot of people don't put those categories together, and I do.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think about this show too, as it evolves. People ask me, like, oh, where are you going to take this? And I think at some point, not ready yet, but at some point, I'll probably turn a lot of this content into a book as well, because there's so many, like the advice section, so many nuggets are dropped throughout these seasons that I want to find a way to just memorialize everything and get that out to the world, similar to how the podcast is out in the world, but in a more hard copy type of high impact way. So I will be watching that when it's time, when it's released. Happy to, promo what you got going on when the book is released. So just keep me in mind. Okay.
I will. Thank you, Brian. I
Of,
appreciate that.
of course. And so now would love to flip the mic, if you will, and ask you. So what's one question you have for me that I could hopefully answer?
This is a good one. What do you believe thought leadership has to do with businesses in today's day and age?
So when I think of thought leadership and business as a whole, I think of more than just the senior execs, speaking down. Right? I think it's people who are working in the space at a maybe higher level than ground level, but definitely involved in the work in some way. So someone who can speak intelligently about the work that they're doing in their respective industry. So I guess arguably, given what I do day to day, I might be a thought leader in the education healthcare space, because I'm heavily involved in some of the initiatives to really try and redefine healthcare education. And so I can speak to that, given some of the work that I'm involved with, either indirectly or leading directly. So when I think of thought leadership, I think about that. Who is working really day to day in the work, in whatever industry that they're involved with, that can speak intelligently, speak also passionately about why you're doing what you're doing in this space, and maybe why others should not only know about it, but potentially get involved in it as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Danielle, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We often talk about the connections that you make on LinkedIn. This was one of them, right? So I'm glad we connected. And to your point of earlier, like knowing when a call, like you feel like a nice connection when someone that you speak with. I had that with you. I think we had that with each other. Hence, we're here today, right?
Yeah.
So it's really been a pleasure having you come on the show and hearing your story. So would love for you to share with our listeners where they can find you and support you online.
Thank you so much. The best place to connect with me is LinkedIn. So you can go on LinkedIn and search Danielle Perlin-Good, Good. You can also go to my website, the Soul-Aligned Ghostwriter.com. And there you will find a link to subscribe to my biweekly Substack. You can also view my services, my media kit, my samples. I would absolutely love to connect with you.
Love that. Well, thank you for that. And look, that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I want to thank Danielle Perlin-Good for joining us today. I'll share all of her info in the show notes. And I hope you all have a great week, and we'll definitely see you next time. Danielle, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Why I Left. Join us next time for more inspiring stories about growth, resilience, and transformation. Visit us online at www.whyileft.co. That's whyileft.co. And subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Alive Podcast Network. See you soon.